Okay, I'm live. Today is inking day, and I actually have some music going on in my headphones. Today we are listening to Miklos Rocha, who was a composer of many films in the sort of golden age of Hollywood kind of thing. So here's what we're doing. Got the storyboard kind of blocked in here, so you can see some of the shots, poses, cuts, whatever you want to call it, that are going to go into this. And so what we're going to be doing tonight is continuing forward on the ink work. I really like so there's where, of course, the inking that I already did ended. And so the inking process should be, um, I think people will find the inking process interesting the way I'm doing it, with my custom brush that allows me to sketch in red and then press a little harder and get nice black lines. It seems to be working actually quite well, and it does achieve what the objective was, which is to basically be able to go from scribbling straight to ink very fluidly. That's what I'm trying to do. So we're about 3/5 of the way through the storyboard. Crazy the things people will say around a lowly eunuch. Indeed. Okay, so there it is. That gives you the gist. So back over to Krita. So what I'm doing is just trying to front load by working in the storyboard to get the basic inked poses done. So first thing I want to do is turn my pencil test and my background down so they're not distracting me. So admittedly, this is a bit of a compromise from this concept of going straight from scribble to ink, since I am going ahead and inking on a separate layer. Now I'm not drawing this character's mouth, the bottom of his mouth, because he's going to have a fair amount of lip sync, and so we're going to animate the mouth over top of the drawing, but you probably guessed that. So yeah, the nice thing about this methodology, obviously the lines look really thick, but this is the actual size, so he's actually fairly small in frame. That's why the lines look so thick. But it's nice because it lets you, let me turn this down even a little bit more, I think. So you can just kind of scribble and find your line and then whoop, like that. So it's very fluid, very fast, and the cleanup on the ink lines has worked fine. Everything looks perfectly acceptable. So yeah, okay, that works. So like, especially for things like this that are sort of geometric, it's nice to be able to scribble the oval, and then just push a little harder and nail it, right? And we'll see, I may wind up cutting his eyebrows to a different layer. It just depends. Just so they can be animated separately, obviously, but you already knew that. So, okay. Let's double check this. Probably want to go ahead and put an indication of that arm in there, right there. So I trust you guys can't hear the music bleeding through, because that would be bad. It wouldn't be that bad, but it'd be a little bit bad. So for those who are curious about how this works in terms of the red lines, if we solo the ink layer, you'll see that if I go Alt M, which for me is the color to alpha effect, well, you can see what happens. It cleans it off quite nicely. And then if I want to dial it in, I can go ahead and tweak the alpha like so to clamp the lines a little bit, perhaps make them a little more dense, you know, whatever, to dial the ink lines in. So, as I say, it's a technique that seems to be proving its value pretty well. Boom, boom. So who knows, maybe on the next sequence I'll be more careful about having just red lines in the storyboard so that I can just go straight into the same layer and start tightening up the ink. In this case, I just decided I'd go ahead and put it on a separate layer. Okay, this probably should be, we probably should just copy this. This really doesn't change, so Control C and then Control Shift V. Okay, and then you can see we've got to do a little bit of cleanup. That's easy enough. We just hit the B key and the E key and just erase back into it. No big deal. Cool beans. Is this? Yeah, okay. I think what I'll do here actually is go ahead and grab his knobby little legs right now. Control Shift V. Might as well just stick them in there. So it could be argued that I'm actually doing more drawing than I technically need to here, just because I'm kind of having fun drawing the character, and so why not, right? It's always good practice, you know. A little more drawing never hurt anybody. So I'll show you, if I was going straight from the storyboard, it would look like this. I'd be doing something like this. So, and again, I'm not going to finish out the bottom part of his mouth because that's going to be animated on a separate layer. So yeah, this is definitely a little bit of a, since the character himself is an homage to Roger from American Dad, so that means basically this is kind of a hybrid Seth MacFarlane / Matt Groening type of character. Just fun stuff, you know. Fun, fun, fun. It's very important that you have fun with your animations, and you'll be doing a lot of it. Well, it looks like I actually don't have any concurrent viewers, so that means I'm so unpopular on YouTube. The one thing no one actually wants to watch is an animator actually creating a real cartoon. Apparently, it's like making sausage. It's cool to fantasize about what it would be like to, as a creator, to write and animate and voice and all the rest. Do your own, just whatever idea you have, anything you want to do, you could do it. But it's probably not that fun to watch. It's just not. I get more. I get more viewers when I wax philosophical. I think actually it's kind of ridiculous, but there it is, friends. Doesn't matter. The important thing is to, as I said, do the work and have a good time, baby. So, boom. Boom. Well, I have been picking up subs, so I'm not really sure what the story is on that. Okay, this shot's going to be a little tricky too from the standpoint of, obviously there's quite a bit of motion, so there's going to be some pretty major tweenage going on. But let's just keep charging forward. Okay, this is cool. We get to finally start on Golik, and actually, once we get, let me see, did I do the close-up of this guy yet? Yes. I mean, basically, we're going to get a lot of reuse pretty much from here on out once I've got Golik drawn. We're going to be able to get quite a lot of, oh boy, that was awful. Let's pull back here. Hey, Sifter. Pull back and what's the clapping for? Did I do something to? Well, knowing you, Sifter, just the idea of sitting here and just quietly and anonymously working away at it is something you'd appreciate, because that's what you do, and I have nothing but respect for your work ethic, young man. That's a waving. Oh, that's a wave. Oh yeah, that was like an applause thing or something. I am just so apparently icon challenged. But I tell you, I cannot emphasize enough how much this drawing into inking methodology is turning out to be, I think, quite a big win. It's the cleanest way I've found so far to just go directly from what's in my head to something that's approaching, finished art, in the sense that you can go ahead and color it and whatnot. I've never seen anyone else do it that way, although I will say, I know TV Paint has a feature like that lets you draw in like red or blue, and then immediately in the same layer put in like black ink, and then you can just press one key and all the red lines disappear. So I'm not the first person to think of an approach of that nature. But like I said, for me, it's all about how can we just go from mental concept to as few steps as possible to something that's actually going to be usable in the show. It's not, I mean, to most people that probably wouldn't be that important, because it's not like everybody's trying to go as fast as I might be. But here's the deal. I'm looking at, I mean, I've been, oh, the cleanup feature? Yeah, I mean, I've used cleanup, and I agree with you. I wouldn't from what I remember, I wouldn't call it unstable so much as just not necessarily all that useful, because once you do a conventional cleanup, you're pretty much gonna have to do a fair amount of post-processing to actually make it all look good. So in this case, what I've found is it kind of runs the gamut in terms of how far you want to go. Um, Meaning, if I take out the red, typically an additional cleanup step is called for, and a 1 pixel blur, and then maybe, you know, a shot by shot specific tweak of the ink lines. But the bottom line for me is that this, in terms of the lines are clean, they're usable, they look like what you see in any anime, seems to be working. So for me, that's a win. That's a win for me. Okay, I think in Golik's case, I'm going to go ahead and put his mouth in there, but we'll see if it winds up being replaced at lip sync time. So Golik, got this fairly wide goatee thing going on. Let me try this with this brush just to see what happens. Actually, I'm going to hit my X key to switch from my foreground to my background color. Two things you should know in Krita: X key bounces between foreground and background color, and the slash key that's on your keyboard with your question mark switches you between the last two brushes. So kind of useful at times when you're, as I say, moving fast. You know, it's an endless quest. You know, it's an endless quest to remove barriers to the creative process, and having oodles and oodles of options is usually not the answer. It's usually about having a few stable options that are flexible, I guess you'd say. Looking all right. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, that was a little too aggressive there, Jack. Yeah, I've tried, I mean, I developed a similar methodology in OpenToon to Homa for sketching. I mean, basically what you do is, if you use the My Paint brushes and you dial in the brushes correctly, then you can get an ink brush that does a good job of covering pencil lines, even though you've got the bugginess with smart raster levels that pretty well guarantees you that the coverage won't be perfect. But and then you just toggle between, like, you hit the 1 key then the 2 key to just toggle between brushes. So I think that's supposed to be pointing that way. Well, keep rocking here. Always flip your canvas. When in doubt, flip the canvas. Boom. Okay, we got a little bit of an alignment issue with his eyes. That's why I really like being able to sketch with the red. And then when it feels right, boom, just commit to that line. Kind of going for that sort of Alex Toth look. Really simple, bold lines. You're looking for the one bold line that pretty much captures the character, so to speak. Okay. Oh, might as well leave his mouth off, actually. So one thing that's also helpful with eyebrows is to just draw, draw the continuity across like this, and then I'll fill it in. Boom. So, yeah, I don't know how long I'll be going tonight. I'm just basically out to get these ink lines done. It's going to be interesting to see. I guess I started to say earlier and didn't finish my thought, was that I only started episode 3 at the beginning of September. So we'll see how this sequence goes. But when this sequence is done, we're going to be near the 6-minute point. That's kind of crazy, 6 minutes in a month. But I think for me, the thing that's significant about that is that that's working on it about, probably 2 hours a day. So this idea of a 12-week production cycle on a complete 24-minute cartoon episode is, for one person, is not unrealistic. I haven't really done it. I haven't pushed that hard. Right now, I've got so much freaking website development I've been doing for clients that I haven't really, I've had other stuff to do, that kind of pays the bills. Fortunately, I love doing that too. Sometimes I have to sort of motivate for it, but once I get into it, as I guess I mentioned the other night, code and animation and music all have this in common. You're working with ideas at the microscopic level that when you play it back at real speed, you see what you've got. They all, it's all the same creative dynamic, really. Let's pull back a little bit here. No, I guess that looks pretty good, actually. I think I'm hearing music from Ben-Hur. That's what it sounds like. Pretty sure this is, yeah, Parade of the Charioteers. That would be Ben-Hur, the old Charlton Heston movie. Miklos Rocha wrote the score. Okay, so in this case, we may split these guys up later, but we do obviously have both characters in the shot. So I'm going to go ahead and get in here and don't like that way. Boom. Keep rocking. I'm actually going to pull out to full screen. It's probably silly to be redrawing him yet again, but like I said, I'm kind of doing it for the practice a little bit here. Nope. Sorry, hit the wrong key. I hit undo when I meant to hit the screen flip. Boom. Do 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 do. And I think this is what I'm doing right here is the reason why, as a methodology, this is such a big win, because you can just scribble. Because the thing I don't like about inking is you got these pencil lines that usually are kind of loose, right? And then you go in and you have to put down a clean line, right? And if your hand wiggles a little bit, or you know what I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Whereas this way, I can just scribble it, feel it, boom. You know, well, of course, there I just actually boogered it up a little bit anyway, but you get my point. Doo-doo, ba-doo, ba-doo. Nope. I do have to admit, though, that working with this character has given me a bit of an itch to do something that is more in that Seth MacFarlane or Matt Groening kind of mode, something funny. You know, that's a proper comedy. Obviously, with Salt and Light, what we have is an adventure slash drama that has some comedic elements. Think Indiana Jones, right? Action kind of thing, adventure, but there's funny stuff. But definitely not a proper comedy. Okay, B key. I'm liking what I see, friends. I'm liking what I see. Boom and boom. N key. Okay. Okay, now this is a little interesting. Okay, I see what I did. All right. I'll go ahead and darken that in a little bit more so we can see what we're doing better. I'm in the wrong layer. Boom. Time for a sip of my tasty beverage. Mmm. Well, Sifter, I assume you're still here. It doesn't look like. Well, I guess I have two viewers. Nobody likes watching me do my work. I'm just not that interesting. There's something beautiful about that, actually, to me. I know it sounds bizarre because you know on YouTube everybody's trying to get everybody's trying to get views and subs and yada yada, and I just can't get away from this mindset I have that I just really don't want to be about that. I want to be about the work, and I think that's probably kind of unusual in a way. Your stream is on a screen, my work's on another screen. That's cool, man. Appreciate you hanging out there in Morocco. Okay, so now this shot, clearly we're going to have to do a little bit more scribbling here because the full characterization was never done in the storyboard. So that's cool. That just is an opportunity to do some more drawing, right? And thinking about, as I've said a few times here, taking that sort of almost like a Christopher Hart approach where you say, oh, I'm just going to completely reduce this to its simplest geometry. For me, for a long time that was hard for me to do. I didn't want to do that because I didn't respect artists like Christopher Hart, for one thing. I just, and and the main reason was because what I always was attracted to in art, in cartooning, was a characteristic that is extremely hard to put into words, and is quite rare. Actually, the best word I can give for it is life. I used to see it. My tastes are changing. I used to see it in John Buscema's comic book art. I don't as much anymore. It took me most of my adult life to not be particularly enamored of Buscema. I still think he was about the best guy around, though, as far as anatomy goes. At least back in the day. I'm sure there's guys that have come along. I mean, there's guys like guys like Jim Lee who came along in the 90s who really, definitely had their act together in terms of anatomy. In the age of Jack Kirby, Buscema was a bit of a holdout for sure. So anyway, what was my point? I tell you, actually, this is where I'll begin to wax a little more philosophical tonight. The thing I've found is really interesting lately is that there's actually very little in art or cartoons, certainly in animation. There's very, very little anymore that inspires me. Okay, so you might think that's a bad thing. But I actually think it's a very good thing. I think what's happened is I've realized the cartoon that I want to watch, like Avatar, came close. It didn't quite nail it, but it came close. There's certain animes I've watched recently that come close. What was that one I was watching? Oh shoot! Actually, Sifter, you'd remember what it is. What's the one with the high school kid who his right hand turns into the girl? And I think the name of the show is the name of the girl. Um, but the balance of quality art and animation and sort of frenetic spurts of action, um, plus the tone and level of humor in it is pretty close to the sweet spot for me in terms of what I would want to watch. But the reality is, as I've realized that there's really not that much out there that kind of floats my boat anymore, what I've realized is, okay, so I have to create what I want to see. And this is an amazing thing to ponder. The reality is we can. You can create. Well, and that's okay. That's no crime, Sifter. But it's kind of annoying me that I can't remember the name of it. I'm scanning through. Toradora was actually pretty good. The heck. So what do you like to watch as far as, I mean, there must be something you like to watch in the anime space, since obviously you must like anime or you wouldn't be doing it. What the heck was that stupid thing called? And it's kind of cool because it's the same thing I'm doing with, actually I never even thought about this till now, but it's the same thing I'm doing with Salt and Light, where it's a 12 episode one season and then the story resolves and then that's the end of it. and because I'm not logged in right now to Tubi. Tubi, by the way, has quite a lot of pretty huge um, bunch of anime. But let me see here. It's crazy. It's one of those things where, you'll go through the whole list and, Dagashi Kashi kind of, sort of tries to come close to what I like to see. I tend to like slice of life with anime. I don't tend to like high action, although I like One Punch Man because it's funny. But yeah, this is baffling. I'm gonna hit myself when I finally see it. Ah, Midori Days. That's what it is. Midori Days. Yeah, the girl's name is Midori. This one. This one's pretty good. It's kind of funny because there's this anime here called Labyrinth of Flames, which I thought was pretty funny too. But there's only 2 episodes. The whole thing's over in 2 episodes. I don't know if it just didn't grab or what the problem was, but I was happy to find that Midori Days sort of captured the same vibe and attitude as this one, but yet it's it's a full 12 episode kind of deal. So anyway, it's all very interesting. All very interesting to me. I'm not actually a massive anime person myself, really, especially because there isn't much in the anime space that I really love to watch. Most of it either moves too slowly or um let's see here. We probably should take this. Okay. Krita thinks I want to grab the whole column. No, Krita, I don't. Okay, so here what we're going to do is let's just grab the whole thing. And yeah, that was what I did in the storyboard. And then we'll just make a few amendments here. Yeah, it's amazing how little I can find to watch that interests me anymore. But I think, like I said, I see that as a good thing. This is kind of the way I view life. Maybe it's got something to do with my age, but you get to a place where you say, whatever I want to see, it's kind of up to me to create it. Oh yeah, I see what's going on. He's supposed to be looking down here in the corner. Okay, and I don't want to draw his mouth because... Okay, so one thing I should correct here is obviously, pretty obviously, his eyes are not looking in the same direction. Looks a bit stupid, so that's still not right. I'm gonna have to flip the canvas again because the problem is I can't. My hand is actually covering what I'm drawing. That's better. That's better, friends. Still not perfect though. I'm gonna do one more time. I'm gonna make one valiant attempt. Okay, got it. Trying to get the stupid eyes to look like they're looking in the same direction. Okay, so I think just because, again, for the fun and the practice of it, I'm going to go ahead and draw him again here. I think for me, it's always good practice for me to just get a little repetition with my characters because I don't consider myself great at staying on character, although I have gotten one flaming hell of a lot better at it in the last year than I used to be. That's for sure. And for the most part, I've been able to pretty much nail this guy at every time I've tried to draw him. I haven't really messed it up yet, which is kind of amazing. So let's go and then do a little bit of the kind of the sour look in his eyes kind of thing. Right, and I'm with you on the analyzing thing. And that's the thing is I just find it amazing. That's why I was kind of speaking a little bit disparagingly the other day of people who are overly obsessed with originality. I just think it's just dumber than a box of rocks, because the easiest way to come up with a creative concept is to like and I've probably given this example here before. I don't know if I have, but if I listen to a song, for example, okay, I will literally listen to the first 4 bars of a piece of music, and immediately my mind will shift off in a new direction, and I'll start writing a new piece from that same starting point, you know. And by the time you're done, you would never know the piece I stole it from. You'd never know, because they're really not very similar. Because I've got my own, sense of melody and whatever, and so and I call that deconstructing and spawning. I have a little thing, CDS, copy, deconstruct. I'm not going to spell it all out, and then spawn. This is my creative methodology. Copy, deconstruct, and spawn. If you want to get better at anything, just copy stuff as close to accurately as you can. Like, for example, as a guitar player, when I was in college, I did reams and reams and reams of scales, really tricky exercises, and I was a very good picker. I was very fast and pretty accurate with picking, more than average, okay? The problem was that my sense of phrasing and melody actually wasn't that great. And so what good did that do me? Whereas, by contrast, just doing the discipline of learning one song perfectly, beginning to end, improved me far more. Like, shockingly amount, a shocking amount. Do 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 do. Okay, so here we've got, this is our arc, if you will. So I'm going to just draw that up there like that, and then I'm going to extend this kind of like that. You probably want to erase that little doohickey there. And I tell you, the reason I feel strongly about that methodology is that I have a lot of faith in humanity, in the sense that I do really believe that it's like people that are over obsessed with having their own unique style. That's like the dumbest thing in the world to me, because when when you learn to draw, you can't help but your style will come through. I mean, you don't need to develop a style. You already have one. It's natural. So you're going to bring your unique twist or flavor to whatever it is you're doing. You just will, and you can't help it. So you don't have to focus on that. You don't have to try. My style of drawing, it just comes out. I can't help it. I can't help it, friends. And so I think when people copy and deconstruct work that they think is good, they will, especially if they spawn off a new idea from it, they won't be able to help it. They will come up with an original idea. And yet it'll be fun for them because they're coming from a place that they love, because they started out deconstructing something they love, So if you start with something you really like and just allow your mind to flow wherever it's going to flow to, in twisting it into a fresh idea, And then the question, I guess, as you get older and more mature or whatever, as a creator, is you become more selective to say, is this idea, does it really please me? It's the most important thing. You know, just yesterday, Valerie deleted 60 pages of the book she's writing. I'm like, wow, you know so that's a lot to delete. And she's like, well, it just wasn't going in a direction that felt good to me, and the person I got to please is me. You know, if it's not fun for me to go back and read it again, then well, and plus, as a creator, you don't know that whatever you're doing is going to be successful. You don't know if it's going to grab, and in my experience, it's fairly difficult to predict. You can to a degree. My most successful film was somewhat predictable, just because I pandered to what I was told was selling well. But it was still a completely original screenplay. It was just the same genre, really, you know. So I think originality is really overrated because people and I don't think, you know, even if you think you're being original, you're not. You're kidding yourself because think about it. Where do your ideas come from? You know, they come from your data bank, your subconscious. So most of your creative ideas, until you intentionally start to mix and match and combine and twist things around, most of this, you know, the ideas you have are actually just pulling from your lexicon anyway. Just saying. Okay, so I would say this I could reuse. I could probably be okay to reuse this. Control C, Control Shift V, and then we'll just kind of move this right. You know, and all of which is to hopefully be a source of encouragement to creators, you know, or people that want to be creators. You know, I have a lot of confidence in people if they just would quit kicking the tires of every new software that comes out, quit wasting all kinds of time on Discord talking about it and pretending that they know this and know that. Just go do the work. You know, just do it. And if you fail, you fail. Whoop de do. You know, you probably will. More than once. That's okay. All right, so now we got to take this cell. Let's copy that keyframe. And then we'll go here and paste that keyframe. We'll probably dink around with his eyebrows. Well, actually, let's do that. Let's take this, duplicate it, and now we will just make a little adjustment. We'll do a little liquefy here. But I'm with you, Sifter. When I'm watching stuff, I have to. It's very difficult for me, even more difficult than finding something that actually inspires me. Is it's even more difficult for me to watch something just to be entertained. I almost feel guilty. It's stupid, but I just don't. You know, I rarely watch something just to be entertained by it. Almost never, actually. Boop 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 boop. Okay, so now what we'll do is we'll just lasso his eyebrows, so we can then take the liquefy tool again. And kind of tweak this to match the storyboard. Although I would say in this case we probably want to grab some of these wrinkles in his forehead and maybe let them reflect that. I mean, obviously there's some musculature in his head that's causing that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now, as I said, fair amount of reuse. Here we can copy this over and then just erase that. Whoops, wrong layer there, friends. Need to be an ink layer. Okay, get rid of that. And just go back in and start drawing again. So what is today? Today's Thursday? I am going to flip this around. I'm going to draw a line across there because I actually got his eyes a little misaligned. Whoops. Come on, I keep hitting the E key and nothing happens. Krita, don't start being silly. Five key, N key, M key. Boom. And I suppose the point of not being watching stuff for entertainment value is that I am like Sifter. I tend to be thinking about, okay, I could do that. I could do that. How could I do that? What would you have to do? Yeah, you're thinking about that stuff. We can't help it. It's just what we do. Let's flip that and do, yeah, it's close. Okay, got a little erasing here we need to do. N key. 5 key. Not bad. Not bad. Everybody on this show has these big collars. It's like everybody's in crazy mega turtleneck world. I have no idea why, by the way. It was just, I don't know. I guess when I was designing the characters, it just kind of felt right. And then I realized I know zero about story structure. Most of the time I take notes of how anime structures its story. Anime is I mean, if you're, well, okay, what am I trying to say? Anime is a little unique when it comes to story structure, and this gets into what I was saying. Oh, I don't know, some time ago on the live stream, I was talking about serial entertainment. You know, like comic books or a series, TV series, whatever that has continuity. Serial entertainment, I mean, if you think about it, if somebody puts a gun to your head and says, okay, you have to produce a script right now, get busy for XYZ show. Okay, what are you going to do? And then as soon as you finish that script, it's going to be, and now you need to actually have the scripts for episodes 3, 4, and 5 underway as well. You know, this type of thing. What are you going to do? Well, what you're going to do is, it's not that you won't be cognizant of, say, 3-act structure or whatever paradigm you like. That's fine. But you also are going to tend to just try to come up with twists and surprises to entertain yourself, right? And in the anime space, you can really feel that coming out, where you can tell that they've really only got, they've got 5 minutes of plot in this episode, and they managed to stretch that 5 minutes of plot into 24 minutes of show. It's the one thing I tend not to like about a lot of animes, is just they drag the dramatic moments out over, a plethora of episodes, frankly. And that's fine. It's a valid approach or whatever. And obviously people watch it and like it. So, but from the standpoint of the writers, I can see what they're doing. You can see into the mind of the writer. You can tell. They're stretching this out because that's their job. Their job is to make this thing go for thus and such many episodes, and you see a lot of the same devices to drag it out coming up over and over. So it's not a horrible thing, but it can make things slower moving than, and now by contrast, I don't actually tend to like 90-minute to 120-minute movies anymore either. I tend to like serial entertainment, meaning TV shows, something you can binge watch or whatever. But the pace of development in anime tends to be quite slow for my taste. Just saying. Just saying. Actually, what kind of dramatic moments are you referring to? Action sequences? Well, when you're writing, let me think about how to answer this, because I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. Okay, when I think these days, especially because I'm allowing the storyboard and the drawing process, the art part of it, to inform how the story is told, that's actually why this character is in the show. Is because I just thought visually and from a personality standpoint, I thought it'd be fun. And then when I thought about that and allowed myself to indulge the idea of this character, all of a sudden ideas started coming to me. I mean, I just had one. I was taking a break earlier and just thinking about this, and this new idea with this same character for a later scene in the same episode came to me and just made me bust out laughing. But I'm not answering your question, I know. You think of storytelling this way. Let me try to steer you in a direction that allows you to have a bit of a framework without necessarily having to resort to a paradigm like 3-act structure, 7-act structure, the Blake Snyder method, the hero's journey. Those are all fine. You can use them, and when you plug your character and their unique circumstances into those paradigms, you will find a story that pops out. Because what you find is that the rigid things about the structure, which are, they're rigid on the one hand, so you could say your story development is loose and fluid. It could go in any direction you want, right? Okay, so when you look at a framework or a paradigm for storytelling, the components of that structure tend to not be fluid. They tend to be very, very rigid. Okay, but that's okay. Why? Well, because they're also very generalized. So what's rigid is general, and what's loose and fluid is specific. And it's the actual negotiation between the specifics that you arrive at and the rigidity of the structure that becomes a really, really potent creative force. So in other words, if somebody was really at a loss and they wanted to feel the security of knowing that they're going to be able to come up with a good story, I would tell them, go find, let's just say we'll use the anime concept because it's, you know, a half-hour show as opposed to a 90-minute movie or whatever. But the principles are the same. But what I would tell them is I would go find one episode of something you really think is funny or entertaining or exciting or whatever it is, and begin to flip all of the specifics. Okay, instead of a male lead, it's a female lead. Instead of being a 30-year-old, you know, warrior, it's a 14-year-old girl. Instead of being really having a lot of gravitas, they're really timid. So what you do is you just start flipping the specifics. And so what that means, what you just did there, was you said, I can take any story that has ever been created that entertained me and use it as my framework. That's my paradigm. I'm just going to take in. So now, to answer your question about dramatic moments, what I mean is this. There's two things you want to think about when you're coming up with story ideas. Number one, whatever is your first idea, explore the opposite. I can't emphasize that enough. Whatever is the first idea that comes into your mind, now allow yourself to creatively to start thinking, if I did the complete opposite of that, what would it look like? You're almost always going to find the opposite turns out to be more entertaining. And I don't know if that's because it snaps you out of copying or resorting to what's, you know, in your lexicon and just kind of mentally taking it from something you've already seen, which is kind of inherently boring if you think about it, because you've already seen it, right? When you start flipping things to their opposites, all of a sudden ideas, then it's like the spawning thing I said. You take this moment and then you start exploring the opposite, and what you'll find is new ideas start happening. Boom, boom, boom. They just flow. Now, maybe that doesn't happen for everybody, but I suspect, at least to some degree, that it does. So that would be the number one thing. And the essence of dramatic flow is surprise. Okay? The whole idea is to jolt the audience. So if things are starting to come down, then boom, have an explosion or somebody busts through the door. You always want to try to introduce a little bit of a surprise that's just a little bit ahead of what the audience is expecting, to where they're not starting to look at their watch and going, you know, we're kind of in the same place here for too long. And then basically, it's been discussed many times in many paradigms that the basic dramatic flow is you've got a status quo. Okay, and I'm actually gonna let me summarize it this way. You've got a status quo that describes the character's normal world. Okay, this is whatever's normal today that they've been living with for a while. Then something comes into the story that wants to jolt them out of it. There's a problem that has to be solved. So you're always going to have a more interesting story if initially your hero is resistant. They don't want to do that. So it's actually the tension between the need of the moment and their resistance that's the heart of all dramatic tension. This is interesting when you start to think about it, because what you find is that in your own life, in your relationships, in your job, and in drama and in comedy, everything that entertains us is actually, by definition, what surprises us. It's what's fresh, what's new, what strikes us as being something we haven't necessarily seen before. Well, what is that? Well, what that always is the tension between what was expected and the resistance that the characters have to engaging with it. So normally the character's got to be dragged kicking and screaming into the situation. And then if you can think creatively of a complication that makes it even worse, to where now there's no choice but to engage with it, and they hate it. Every moment of it, they're resistant, right? So the external drama is this situation. It's the whatever's going to end the world that the hero has to solve. That's the external. And then the internal has to do with the fact that they're resistant to whatever role they would play to solve the problem. And that can take all kinds of different, look all kinds of different ways. But once you have an externality that's forcing a change combined with an internality that's forcing a change in the person, then you've got the makings of a structure. There's your structure. And then what you do is you say, if you're at a complete loss for how to work out the plot, do it in reverse. Okay? Start with your status quo and then look at your final situation that you're going to have at the end of the show when everything's resolved and ask yourself, working backwards, what would have had to have happened to get me there? Okay? So that gives you a basic structure and a methodology for dramatic story problem solving, right? When you're stuck, work in reverse. Okay? Beyond that, those are the biggies. Those are actually the biggies. And then what you'll find is that the basic flow is, um, you know, as the character gets sucked into the situation, the drama rises, and then you let it release a bit, and then it goes higher, and then it releases a bit, and then it goes higher, and maybe this is like the climax of the story before we get to the resolution. But basically, you want to essentially alternate between sequences of rising tension and then sequences of giving the audience a breather. That's pretty much it. I mean, you, Sifter, are a creative enough guy that I'm really sure if you just indulge those ideas alone, you've got all the bones of 10,000 different stories. And if you're stuck on, a character or whatever, just steal something from something you like by changing the details around and reversing things and just flipping it on its head. It gives you security in your storytelling because it allows you to take something that you know is good because you liked it. It's something you watched. But yet, once you start reversing enough things, you're going to find that you could actually, ostensibly rip off most of the structure of an entire story, even the pace of the scenes, even the pacing of the storytelling. You can really steal a lot without actually having what you stole it from, visible at all. It's not even visible. And in fact, I would argue that every good show you've ever watched is that already. Everything you've ever watched that you like is nothing more than a twisting around of the stuff that they liked. So what is One Punch Man? Well, One Punch Man is just a hero who's both ambivalent and resistant to the role of a hero. Why? Well, because he just wants to live his normal life and be able to go to the store on Saturday and get the discounts. So the incongruity between that driver for him, the internal, and the external, which is a monster that's tearing up downtown, the incongruity between those two and those two things working together is what makes the show work. That's why it's funny. He's a funny hero because he doesn't want to be a hero, So, I mean, that's just unpacking some very specific ideas about both structure and then specific shows or whatever that, hopefully that helps a little bit. Action sequences are just, something you throw in at pace. As I said, you want to have a pace to it of rising tension. Action's just a useful and necessary. Well, it's not necessary. It's only necessary in an action show, but just a useful way to introduce excitement, danger, all the stuff we like to see. So, did that help? Does that help? I don't want you to be beating around the bush, running in circles. I think this kind of gets into some of the things that we talked about with another person who will remain unnamed. Is if you're finding yourself as you say, beating around the bush, running in circles, I want you to get extremely specific about what it is in your mind and in your emotions that's telling you, it might be telling you that whatever this idea is that you're working on isn't good enough, but you got to get really specific about what you're calling running in circles. That is a very general and nebulous concept. Emotionally, it might feel like that because you're like, on the one hand, I don't have the answers of how to solve this problem or come up with something that's good enough or whatever. Um, Combined with ideas and images and emotions you have in your mind of what constitutes doing that well. You have to get specific with yourself about what is the narrative, what's the story you're telling yourself about what that process should look like. Because what you're going to find, I'm sure, is that that narrative has accuracies in it, but it's incomplete. The narratives we tell ourselves are always incomplete. And what happens is we get a narrative in our mind, and I hope this is helpful to you because it's really important. It's an important thing about everything you do, in life, is we tell ourselves this narrative, and the narrative is by definition an incredibly simplified picture of actual reality. So reality is very complex, and there's a lot of nuance to it, and blah, 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 blah. And the way we function as people is with narratives. So the narrative is always going to be extremely S for simple. The problem with it is that the narrative is always woefully incomplete. And what we do is we take this simplified picture and we place an emotional label on it, okay? So going in circles. So going in circles is a shorthand, really shorthand narrative that encompasses this entire experience. And the problem is, if you feel like that's been a problem for you, because obviously you're going in circles, you cannot solve that problem until you recognize that this is nothing but a narrative, and you have to start interrogating all the dimensions of it. Sometimes that requires education, because you might have to get some new information about it. Like if you said, well, what are the components of story structure? If your answer is, well, I don't know, well, then it might be helpful to maybe read a book over here or watch a YouTube video over here. So education is enormously important, because what you want to do is expand your lexicon so you can speak intelligently and kind of authoritatively to the degree that you want to be able to about what it is that you're trying to engage with. If you take something that's important to you, if you were to say to me, writing a good story is important to me. Now, it might turn out, as an animator, it actually might turn out that it's not that important to you. For some people, it isn't. They just want to animate. They just want to make things move, and that's fine. Okay? But if you say to me that this is important, then I'm going to start asking you really specific questions about the narrative you're living by, because basically what you just said was, and I don't know if this necessarily applies to you in this case exactly. I'm saying this is what people tend to do, okay? Is you just told me a story that says this is what I want to do, and essentially I can't. There's something stopping me from having an enjoyable creative experience with this thing. And that's a horrible problem to have. I mean, you're because you can't feel good about what it is you're creating, and it's a very dangerous thing, because what that means is you might have actually come up with an idea here in this story. Well, this is the narrative you're telling yourself, but in the story that you're coming up with, you might actually have a brilliant idea. You might have a really good idea. But think about this. If you don't have a framework in your mind to be able to judge accurately whether your idea is good, and you're not confident enough in your own abilities that you can look at it and say, well, you know what? I have enough experience as a viewer, as a consumer, that I know if it entertains me, I know it's good. Right? And so, and as creative people, especially like in the animation space, a lot of times what we do is we create stuff that we know sucks, and then we try to tell ourselves all kinds of stories about the software or the technicalities of it, we try to make up a new story that excuses the fact that in our deepest heart we know it's not good enough. Well, what's the difference between the person who knows and the person who doesn't know? What's the difference? The person who knows it's good or it's bad versus the person who literally doesn't have a clue. They're both the same person in the sense that they're both trying to do well. Well, the difference is the confident person has a lexicon in their own mind for judgment. They've developed the ability to look at a thing and judge for themselves and have confidence in that judgment. So, and how can you do that if you're not a confident person? Because one person looks at a movie like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou and says, oh my God, it's the stupidest movie ever. Like it killed me to sit through it. Whereas I look at that movie and go, I find that movie hilarious. Well, who's right? Neither one of them are right. Neither one's right. They both just have an opinion, and both opinions are valid. Some people will like it, some people won't. And guess what? That's true about your story too. Some people are going to like it, some people aren't. You can't please everybody, and that's why it's most important, by far, at all times, to please yourself. But within the context of if you can accept that, okay, fine, I get it. That's the most important thing is please thyself. Okay, great. Then the question really becomes, am I actually able to create a disconnect in myself where I really cannot accurately tell myself whether I actually like something? Right? Because if somebody else had done it, you would be able to say whether you liked it or not. Think about that. If somebody else did it, I could say whether I liked it or not. But if I do it, and you just said it probably right here in your last comment, correct. And it's possible that they won't understand what's going on. It is possible, right? If you're going to get good at creating something, you're going to create some sucky stuff. And that's okay. Nobody ever gets to where they create anything good without creating some sucky stuff first. I created 1, 2, 3, 4. I created 4 complete feature films. 4 complete feature films before I created one that was good. And actually, even though that one was successful, I don't even think that one was that good. And it was one of my later films that, by the way, by comparison is a complete failure that I think is a much better film. What do you do with that? Okay, so yes, if you complete a script in a week or two and send it to you, would you read it and send me some feedback? Sure, absolutely. I've had many people do that for me over the years, or with me. They'll send me their screenplay and they want me to, and I'll tell you, I will tell you exactly what I think. And I usually can, I can look at a screenplay and usually if it's not working, it's going to be not working pretty quickly. And normally I would be able to tell you very specifically what's wrong. Usually in fact, I'll say this for you, Sifter, because I suspect you're delving into the probably into the sci-fi adventure genre. Is that true? Put it in the chat. If you're doing sci-fi adventure-ish, is that kind of what you're working on? Looking for a yes or no in the chat. Okay. All right. And based on what I've seen of your work, that's been the case. Okay. So here's the danger I want you to understand. I don't remember who said this, but somebody said this a long time ago, and it's a really important thing, especially for people that are dealing in fantasy or science fiction especially. Okay. There's a rule in science fiction that needs to be understood right out of the gate. Okay. In science fiction and fantasy, you're typically going to have some element of what you could call magic, although you're probably not treating it as magic. You're treating it as technology, or an advanced, or an advanced society, where all the things that go with that. Okay, so here's the danger with sci-fi that is that the people who write it often remember the feeling that they got when they enjoyed, you name it, Dune, Star Wars, I don't probably like to use it as a good example because it's so universally enjoyed by people. But um, when people that are trying to write sci-fi turn around and draw upon what they enjoyed about sci-fi, what they invariably do wrong is they bombard the audience with many, many dimensions of magic and terminology, and they make this horrible mistake of assuming that that's going to excite the audience, okay, and that the audience is going to find that compelling. And I've got friends who've written books recently where they made this mistake, and unfortunately, in one case, I told her she had made that mistake, and she didn't correct it, and I don't think the book's doing probably as well as it might have done, right? Okay. And the problem is, in a fantasy book, it looks something like this. The Ragaraths from the land of Zambona traveled across the great wasteland until they encountered the Hoobie-Joobies, and a great battle ensued. Okay, and they go on and on and on with all this freaking terminology about islands and maps and creatures and species, and they don't understand that the audience does not give a shit about any of that. Okay? And that's why Star Wars isn't a good example, because what Star Wars got right is George Lucas got you on board with the kid, with Luke. The kid who is, despondent because he's stuck on this stupid desert island. He's got to do this work all the time he doesn't really want to do. And it's like, so number one rule with sci-fi is don't forget this is 100% about the characters, not the technology, not the world that they're in. It's not the world that they're in. It's the person who's in that world is what the audience cares about. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, good rule in science fiction is only have one magical element. Okay, one thing that's either high tech or magical or whatever. Everything else should be relatable. Everything else should be your story should be able to be plugged into a completely normal human context and make sense other than the one magical element. If you have more than one, you're probably going to get caught up in that and bombard your audience with a bunch of crap they don't care about. And I've seen it over and over. So that's the thing you don't want to do. Start with the character. Now, if you want to look at pacing, here's a good rule. A good rule with pacing. You say, okay, in this sequence or this scene of the show, basically XYZ needs to happen. Okay? Using that as your starting point, good rule, enter late and leave early. You want to enter the situation or the scene as late as you can and still have it make sense. So let me give an example of this, actually, and then I think I'm going to wrap up for tonight because I'm starting to run out of gas. When I started writing I started writing a novel version of the screenplay that was my most successful film. Now, I haven't published a novel, and there's a whole story behind that I won't get into. But my point is this. I started the book out with the main character saying, it wasn't my fault. That's what I started the book with. I started the book with Riley saying, it's not my fault. Okay, now think about that. This is a mistake that fledgling authors make. They think you have to. This is why fledgling authors, especially writing fantasy, tend to give you a whole chapter of crap you don't care at all about. They just waste your time with all this terminology, and they think you're going to be charmed by all the names of the lands and the names of the creatures and the history. They think you're going to be charmed by that. Wrong. But by contrast, you can have a fantasy story that starts with a moment like I just described where the character's just saying, look, it's not my fault. And you go, as the audience, you go, okay, what's going on? That's what you say. You say, what's going on? So it isn't that you can't confuse your audience by throwing them right into something that's very human, that's very relatable. The person that's stuck in a situation where they're going, wait, I didn't cause this. What's going on? It's not my fault. And you go, well, wait a minute, what's going on? The key thing is you just have to pay it off. You have to make sure that if you're going to plant a seed of uncertainty in the mind of the audience, they're going to go with you, especially if they're entertained in the moment by the characters. They will go with you. They will give you a little bit of time. Just make sure you pay it off. Meaning, whatever loose ends you introduce, make sure that you tie them up later. If you don't, they'll never forgive you, because that's like a it's like a Deus Ex Machina, being used to solve a problem in a story. It's kind of the reverse of that. It's like I'm going to throw little things into my story just to tease the audience and keep them engaged. Well, if it turns out later that there's never any payoff or explanation of those things, then the audience feels that. They know you just threw that in to tease them, and they're looking for the payoff. So that's another thought you might want to think about. But if I'm going to do a fantasy or sci-fi, my top priority is going to be to start out with something that's very human and relatable. And frankly, I guess I in Salt and Light, I walked the tightrope a little bit. The show starts out well because it jumps right in with Mel and Asher with a little bit of humor, but and what I did was I knew, and I guess when I say the tightrope is that Salt and Light begins with a backstory, which is like a complete sin based on what I'm saying. It's like you're going to waste the audience's time on the backstory. Well, what I did was I said, number one, we're going to keep the backstory down to like 3 minutes or 4. But number two, we're going to hide the backstory in the fact that Asher's telling the backstory to Mel. And Mel keeps jumping in going, wait a second, Asher, you're not even answering the question, right? And so by hiding the backstory in that very human interaction between the two characters, for me, basically it worked. I still would probably prefer to have not had to put the backstory in there, but at the time it did seem like the right choice. So history will judge me as to whether it was, because maybe it wasn't, But I knew that the backstory was going to suck if I didn't hide it in a normal human conversation that has a purpose. So, anyway. I do hope that's helpful. I always do try to be helpful. But yeah, you can send me something and I'll look at it and give you my 2 cents worth for sure. Okay, it is looking here like until we get here, this is all reuse for sure. And here, the only thing that isn't reuse is basically the body language with his arms. So, reuse. Honestly, basically most of the work. This is amazing because this sequence is like 2-3 minutes long, but basically most of the heavy lifting for this entire sequence is done. I mean, because look at this. We got this animation at the beginning when he's going to be flitting around cleaning house, but once we get into the characters, from here on out, we've got a dialogue situation which with some humor in it for sure. So that's great. All I got to do is get this guy painted and I'll be able to start reusing some of these assets. And I think that this method of working is probably going to pay off because the last sequence I did, I mean, it blitzed through really fast. So anyway, I think that's it for me tonight. It's been, oh my gosh, 2 hours, 7:30. And, hopefully somebody out there, Sifter or someone else, is actually helped by these ideas about storytelling and all the rest, because I want us all to be liberated, to be our best creative selves that we can be, right? Of course I do. So with that, I will. Oh, hey Tom. So with that, I'm going to sign off and say, as you know, guys, there will be more later.